Yo, alright folks, so version 2 of So You Want to Be a Lighting Artist. Every year or so I update this talk, so some things may look familiar, there's going to be some new things in here as well. The old version is still available on the channel. As I gain more experience in the industry, these talks get updated. This is a talk that's targeted for, you want to improve your lighting as a 3D artist or environment artist, you want to become a lighting artist. What does that look like? And the skills you need to, demystify into the realm of lighting. So we'll get started. Big shout out to patrons. So this is the Patreon cat board. You can put your own cat or you get chosen a cat. This is all the content we have available. You get one video a month. We've been almost going for a year. There are 4 master talks that are available. One is upcoming with Nate Stevens. He's going to give some environment art feedback for people. But we have a 3-hour talk with Scott Warren about HDR, color spaces, equipment, a talk with Thomas, and then a talk with Sarab. So we have master talks and we have all these videos you can access as well for £4.99 a month. Also, you get to join the Discord, get some ranks, active voice chat most days. So yeah, support if you want to get more of this sort of stuff and more master talks and whatnot. Anyway, let's get into it and let's deliver our updated version of this. So new slides, new template. You'll probably see cats again because we love cats. So yeah. So you want to be a lighting artist in the games industry. This is what we're going to cover. So this can take about 45 minutes. For the Q&A, I think what would be good is, as it's not live, leave some questions in the comments and I'll get back to you. And that can be like our Q&A, right? So we've got 3 sort of colored sections we're going to go through: green for career guide, purple for workflow guide, and red for portfolio guide. And as you can see, we'll have eyes hidden by the taskbar thingy. We have some cats hidden around in the slides as well. So firstly, a little bit about me. I'll make this as quick as possible because I want to get into the meat of the conversation. So if you're new to this channel, my name's Elliot. I go by EMC 3D Online. I've worked as a game art teacher for environment art. I've worked as an environment artist. I run the YouTube channel and the Patreon, which is where we push content out from industry and then videos from myself and foster a community of environment, lighting, and technical artists mostly. It's not closed off to anyone else. It's just that that's the specialism of the community. Some of the games I've worked on. So starting on PlayStation Home, which, if you remember PlayStation Home, let me know in the comments because that is super old school. Going into games like some VR games, some movie games, and then I taught for about 6 years at Staffordshire University. I led the course there for a number of that as well. Re-entered the industry after teaching. Worked on Until Dawn as a lighting artist. Did a little bit on Off the Grid, and then currently, as of this snapshot, I've been working at Endreams. Education-wise, started off at college, went to a university, worked a bit in industry, did a master's and came back. A pretty traditional academic route in using game art schools at the time. And here's some of the stuff that I've worked on. So some of these are just cropped out from my portfolio, which you can go have a look at as well for full quality. So cinematic lighting on Until Dawn, level lighting on Until Dawn, some of my personal work that I've been doing with sponsored asset packs or just asset packs that I've bought, and relighting them and reimagining the compositions into something that, aims for a high quality or visually interesting. Always try to aim for that. And then my portfolio, which, you can access going to the links in the description below. So let's get into it. Career guide. So you want to be a lighting artist or you want to learn more about the role of lighting. What is it? What am I doing on the job? What are the types of lighting? Especially if you're coming from film and wanting to do lighting in games as well, because film has a role called lighting artist, but it's completely different to the lighting artist in games. So, this will help translate what those skills are, as well as if you're a junior or wondering how to improve on your lighting as well. So firstly, what do you do? Whenever you want to learn about what sort of job you want to do in the industry and what you're aiming for, go and get yourself a job description. Go online, look for, lighting artist job. Get a few of the job requirements and read through them. That gives you a baseline of what you need to focus on and what you want to aim for. You do the same environment art, do the same character art, use a job description to set up how your learning is going to be. So if we have a look at the lighting artist one, right? So crafting immersive environments, realistic or stylized, that enhances the game's narrative and mood. Basically, can you light something and have a good mood? Can you follow some reference, a scene from a movie, light the scene? Does it look good? Does it enhance the mood? Does it look like the reference you're trying to make? Manipulating light sources, shadows, color. Again, just the way you light, how you placing your lights, what sort of shadows are you aiming for? Lighting is very, very art fundamentally, right? Colors, value, guiding the player, especially on narrative games where there is a linear path progression through the scene. Collaborate. So this is the soft skill. Can you work with level design, environment art to make sure lighting is being considered early on enough to where when the final stuff gets in game, you don't have a cave with no openings, you don't have an interior with no windows, because that's going to be pretty boring lighting wise, right? So you want to be there from the start as much as you can, and you want to be able to work in a team so that every team is doing the best in terms of thinking about lighting and placing openings where lighting can work and help the player. Yeah, doing technologies and tools, optimization. So can you light stuff? Can you optimize? Can you make it look good? And can you do gameplay lighting? That's the crux of it. These job descriptions can help you with that. All right. In terms of the roles, there's kind of 3 subsets of jobs. Some of them are rarer than others. It really depends. Some of them will be called lighting artist, but will have a subset that you do within the other 2 jobs. So it really depends on the studio. Big AAA high budget studios are going to have a lot more specialized lighting roles, whereas your AA, 100, 150 person teams are going to probably just call it lighting artists, right? And you're going to do a bit of everything in there. So we have a few ones here. So cinematic, level, and technical. And this is the general hierarchy that you will have in a studio, going from your junior to your mid to your senior, and then eventually leading into one of 2 roles, a lead or a principal. Now, I do have a video on what the difference is between principal and lead lighting, or a principal and a lead. It basically stems from the fact that when you're here in sort of a senior level, you're still doing a lot of art. Yes, you have added responsibilities and management and all that sort of stuff, mentoring people, but you're still making art, right? You're still lighting stuff. You're still making materials if you're an environment artist, and vice versa. Now, historically, what used to happen was people would progress in their job and they would go from senior and they would go into a lead. Now, a lead is much more of a management role than it is an artistic role. You need the artistic skills to do that, but when you become a lead, you really don't make much, if any, art. So you are responsible for looking after your team, scheduling your team, working on wider issues that may affect the workflow of your team, developing team members in one-to-one meetings. You're basically in meetings all day and managing things. You really don't have time for art. Some leads will carve out a tiny part of the game where they can work on it. It's a low risk area and they can get something looking pretty cool, right? But most of your time is people management, cross team and within your team. So a lot of folks would actually drop down back from lead to senior because they want to make more art. So, a role was created that equals the lead in terms of the visual hierarchy of promotions and pay and job career progression, but you don't do all the people management. You have a little bit of people management because of the principal, right? You've got a lot of experience and you still want to help out your teammates. You don't want to completely shut off your office and be like, don't talk to me whatsoever, I'm just going to be doing stuff. But it's nowhere near as much as the lead lighting artist. So as a principal, you have complex problems, you work on complicated solutions to things. You could be working on a bigger level, problem solving various parts of a environment or lighting pipeline. You're just there to get put onto work, solve it, and help set the route for the rest of the team that are maybe working on other levels or aren't on the part of the game that you're on yet. You tackle the complicated problems, right? You get given a big slice of the pie and responsibility. So a principal lighting artist could, for example, be responsible for the entire weather system of a game and have a team behind that in terms of they have to work with tech and programming. They could be responsible for the entire exposure system of a game. They get given bigger features of the game to manage and work with, right? Whereas the lead is building the team and the overall hierarchy of the lighting team. Now, there is one more job that is emerging. Still, I don't see it everywhere, but usually from here, you can go on to be a lighting director, which is usually overseeing an organizational lighting sort of direction for multiple studios or game. Usually you're super AAA at this point, right? To have a lighting director. So I haven't seen it too much, but it does exist. So, cinematic lighting artist. This is a job role. I know I still use this example because it's great that they're able to show before and after cinematic lighting. So, this is credited in the bottom right to Miki Elisa Hansen. And this is an example of a cinematic shot of these 2 fluffy characters with just the environment lighting. So, an environment lighting artist or a lighting artist has got in and lit the environment, but they haven't done any cutscene lighting because it's a different role in a lot of the bigger studios. So you can see, right, even though these characters are getting lit, they don't really stand out from the background. They don't really look juicy. But once the cinematic lighting artist goes in, they add a bunch of lights like 3-point lighting, material response lights. They'll put a movie set. They'll put lights all the way outside the camera because in a cinematic, the camera is 100% controlled. If you turn that camera in an unintended way, you would probably see a bunch of broken stuff in terms of lighting and whatnot. So you actually can be a lot more creative and place a lot more fake movie style floating lights in a cinematic because the player isn't in control. They can't turn the camera around and see what they're going to do, right? So in this case, we've got like some material response on the robot. We've got like a nice little rim light here, then a fill light here. You can see in the eye, we've got a catch light. So there's like a light like up here somewhere hitting the character. They've also lit the background. So yes, cinematic lighting artists can do additional lighting in the cutscene for an environment. You just have to be careful because if this looks like this in a cinematic scene in terms of the background, and this is what is in gameplay, if this cutscene was to go back to the same area and transition into gameplay, you would see this pop in, or you would be able to tell, even if it's a fade to black transition, that this no longer has this light. So it could be that this cinematic takes place in an area where you're not going to instantly go into gameplay in the exact same area. But yes, you do have to be wary of how much you light a background in a cinematic shot. Because in environment lighting, you're not lighting every corner to be pretty. You're lighting the whole thing holistically to look good. You don't know where the cinematic cameras are going to be pointed necessarily until they're done. So in this case, we're pointing the camera in this like corner, which a lighting artist has not had any need to go in and add lights to because it's just part of a playable environment. But as soon as the cinematic camera focuses in on there, obviously we get a background that is a bit dull because we're focusing the camera on that location with some characters. So yes, a cinematic lighting artist will add some extra spice to that area to make it more juicy. However, it is a balancing act, picking where you choose to light environments in cutscenes that will disappear after the cutscene is done versus already having it in the environment. And that's just an experience thing. The more you do it, the more you'll see. Now this is cropped up slightly down here, apologies, but I'll read out whatever's in this corner. So lights will be spawned when the cutscene starts. Yep, it's like Unreal Sequencer. If you load up Unreal Sequencer, you start a cutscene, everything pops in, close the sequencer, everything pops out. That's spawning on runtime. So yes, these cinematic lights won't be in the game. You won't run for a random cinematic light in gameplay because they only activate when the cutscene is activated. So yeah, separate characters, we got a bit of fog, we got some silhouette, we got very art fundamentally things going on here in terms of what is happening. In these shots, you usually have to, it depends on the workflow, but sometimes you would spend 30 minutes to an hour per shot, try to clear 10 to 15 shots a day. So you have to be somewhat fast with what you're doing as well. You can't just sit on a single shot for the whole day, right? So it is a bit faster than environment lighting. And you get a bit more creativity versus environment lighting. And here's an example. I'll A/B this a few times while I take a drink, but take a focus on what this looks like with environment lighting, what it's going to look like with cinematic lighting, and I'll cycle back a few times as I have a drink. All right, so get ready. So you can see, right, you can see how much material response you get from things on these characters. So that is what cinematic lighting does, especially on cinematic heavy games, because some of these cinematic games, they have thousands of shots, so many shots to get through. So yes, that is why it becomes its own role to make cinematics look good. And you'll notice in some games, there aren't really cinematic lighters. They just use environment lighting. You can tell they look a bit dull in some of the cutscenes, right? And they're relying on gameplay. So it depends again on how narrative driven a game is versus the studio cost of hiring cinematic lighters to work on their stuff versus relying on game lighting to do all the cutscenes, right? Some games do that, some don't. And yeah, cinematic lighting realms. So cinematics often take place in their own realms, such as Unreal Engine Sequencer. So when you light a cinematic, lights are placed within the sequence and not part of the environment, which means you can be more creative. So this is a shot I lit for Until Dawn. There is a light below the character lighting up. That's why the light in the character's eyes is much lower. And then I've got a rim light and a spotlight, and I've got a bit of fog in the background. Extra fog, not the fog from gameplay. So, you know, you can move things wherever you want as long as each shot makes sense logically, right? Obviously in this shot, there is a TV on the right side that you can't see. That is giving the impression that there is light on one side and darkness on the other. Level lighting, however, is a bit of the opposite. So you have to light holistically. Player can move anywhere, move to any corner. You have your focal points, like in this shot by my friend Ilya. You have a focal point from the TV, casting light out. You have a zone from the window. You have this nice gradient lighting coming in. But you don't really have the opportunity to go in and put lots of spotlights like you would in a cinematic lighting pass to highlight certain points because there is no fixed camera. Player can move anywhere they want within this interior. So you're not going to suddenly place 1,000 lights to make sure every place. I'm gonna feel like the Kazoo kid, right, from that video. Like, where am I looking? You know, so many shinies. It has to be minimal, and a lot of the best environments are lit with the most minimal amount of lights. You know, instead of 80 lights, can you use 20? Instead of 20 lights, can you use 10? This, again, ties into physically based lighting, right? That you want to have as much of a physical and realistic response as possible before you break the rules and do the art direction. Responsible for lighting level, interpreting the concept art or references of lighting into 3D. You'll work with exposure, fog, sky, post-process, local and color grading, basically post-processing and the entire look of the scene, the tone mapping of it and all that sort of stuff. And this bottom line says place light fixtures in areas that will aid cinematic lighters. So if you're able to light an environment, knowing where the block out cinematics are going to be, let's say this scene, right? Let's say we didn't have the TV on and there was like at least 50 shots of a cinematic that take place on this sofa. If you don't turn that TV on, the cinema lighter can only use this window to place some additional fake lights, knowing that the player's going to know that sofa has a window on the side, right? So you can maybe justify a bit of a soft key light from the window. But if you have this TV on, suddenly the cinematic lighter has much more room to play with. So they have a shot that's on the sofa. Camera is maybe on the desk pointing them, so you don't see the TV in the shot, but you know it's on from gameplay. So now those cinematic lighters can add a bunch of fake spotlights with this sort of greenish key light to give the characters backlighting, rim lighting, key lighting. And suddenly those cinematics are going to pop. So try and give a good opportunity of key lights for the cinematic lighter to play with when you're lighting a level, if you are there before the cinematics take place, or if you know where they're roughly going to take place. Not always the case, but it's something to keep in mind for sure. Here's some examples. Again, this is from Ilya. So this is I believe this is a latest pack that he relit and redressed a little bit. Very nice stuff. These are all blueprints, these little lights on the path. And then he's got global lighting with a sky and the moon. And it's beautifully balanced. You can walk around this whole scene and it looks amazing. So he's done such a good job on this, right? So, and yeah, light the level, not the frame. So as a lighting artist, a lot of us will make a lighting piece where the camera's locked in a more cinematic style. That's fine. Eventually though, as lighting becomes more and more competitive, you want to show that you can do gameplay lighting. So can you light something that looks good from all angles and take screenshots within that, then move the player around it, versus having a fixed camera where you can place cinematic lighting lights almost and rendering something. Both of those are good to have, but have some video game lighting in your portfolio as well to balance. So you're not just always having a flat camera shot with a light always hitting from the same angle. Have some gameplay lighting in there. It'll help a ton. And then technical lighting artists, very rare role because it requires somebody that can, there's a bunch of different types of technical lighting artists, but you need somebody that can do a bit of coding or a bit of Python or can work really well with color systems or weather systems and blueprint. Usually they'll solve much more complex problems and bridge the gap between graphics engineering and lighting artists. They can speak both languages enough to get graphics engineers to give us the features we want without us not understanding the lingo to use to get certain things. So in this example, you can see from Jan, they've made this is from the Callisto protocol, which has some great technical lighting behind it. So they have their own color grading tool. They have a bunch of light functions. The technical lighting artists also made a bunch of tone mapping adjustments. These types of things are usually what you'll do, right? And lighting tools. Can you make tools that make the lighting artist's life easier so they're not doing a lot of repetition? And you want to get one of these early because the more you do a game without lighting artists, the more incorrect it's going to be, because environment artists don't necessarily understand about tone mapping and adjusting tone mapping to control contrast or adjusting physically based lighting. These are usually things that the lighting and technical artists will have much more knowledge of. So a lot of the time, a lighting artist will join a team in the second half of production, and most of these things will be locked in and broken. Whereas if you can get someone early, your lighting pipeline has gone through a bunch of iterations to be set up in the most logical way possible for the game that you're doing. And yeah, lighting breaks all the time, and we get blamed for everything. Even it's like, oh, here's a collision issue with the door, lighting's fault. So you have to be able to fix problems, but also help educate your teams as to where issues that look like lighting aren't necessarily lighting. So, you could have a flat looking level, but all the albedos are dark. That's not a lighting issue. That is an issue with the albedo brightness, which again is something we would usually advise on. So yeah, a lot of that ties into all the lighting artists, but technical more so. They will make the tools and do the pipelines and do the complicated lighting stuff. And they are very, very rare roles to get because you need to have the technical and artistic knowledge as well. So yeah, they are unicorns. Here's some examples. So Surab, awesome chap. He did a guest talk for us again on the Patreon. Works at CD Projekt Red. This is a tool that he made for Concord that basically is a false color tool. False color tools are great because they give you visual representation of scientific or physical values. So, you know, if you go to red, that's bad. If you go to green, that's good. If you go to orange, that's a certain, you know, level of okay. And it's used in different ways. So we had something like this on a previous game I worked on, and we had lots of cinematics, and we knew that key lights on characters, when we use something like this, should be purple and dark value should be blue. So sometimes we would load a cinematic and that key light was not purple in this view, it was yellow, which meant it was too hot, it was too intense. So this is a visual way to get your values right, because we will often tunnel vision on lighting values. We'll think something is bright enough when realistically it's not. Our eyes get tricked all the time, especially depending on the lighting environment you're in. So I'm in a dark room right now, but if I'm in a very warm room with warm lamps, that's going to affect the way I'm lighting. So having a technical way to review this is going to be key. Here's another one. So another type of technical lighting from Igor. So in this case, we've got a shadow that looks pretty bad because it's covering all the characters. And the shadow makes sense because it comes from the bottom of the lamp. So how can we get a shadow that doesn't cover the players, still casts their own light, but then has a nice little back shadow, right? Shadow proxy, you know, using either a light function or a different mesh to cast shadows from. So there's this and more, way more technical lighting magic you can find on both of these portfolios of the realities and issues you will run into when lighting a game. And what the tools are you need to do to help fix them. And yeah, invest in tech early, not late. The later you leave it, the more it'll be broken. I think every lighting artist goes through this. You'll join a studio and it's been lit by whoever for the first 2 years and all the systems are locked in and you can't change the system, so you have to work with it best you can. Some studios you'll join and the lighting is very heavily invested in and things will be good. My biggest advice to anyone, if you're in like a position of starting to run a studio or setting up a team, get a good lighting artist early. They'll set you up with proper PBL considerations, lighting workflows, because lighting, it seems easy when you begin at the start of a game, placing lights and just doing whatever. But as soon as you get 2 years in and you have 15, 20 levels, a bunch of problems are going to start appearing, especially when you rework lighting that if you had planned for that earlier on enough with a lighting artist, it's going to minimize the blow. So I'll just read this out because my cam is kind of hiding this. The later you leave it, the more broken it will be. Often lighting artists are hired towards the second half of production, but by then there have been years of technical debt built up on the lighting and rendering pipeline. Cannot easily be changed. Fixing the tech early is key, and exactly why this role, I say this role, but all basically getting a good lighting artist in general will help you fix a lot of these issues. And shared role skills. So no matter what type of lighting artist you are, what are the things you can start looking at and considering so that no matter what you do, you are working in the best practices possible. So for dynamic workflows, it's always about light amount, shadow depth, so the amount of shadows being casted by lights, attenuation radius, the longer or wider an attenuation, the more expensive. Are all your lights lodded? There's a setting in every light called max fade and max draw distance. Set those. Don't leave them on 0. How expensive each light type is. Do you know why a point light is way more expensive than a spotlight? Why an area light is super expensive? Why a spotlight is cheap? If you don't know, have a look and research online. Baked versus lumen. Again, that baked lighting is still out there. It is still a workflow. Look at the things behind that. For example, with baked lighting, one of the issues is a lot of baked lighting doesn't bake, you know, in Unreal, right? It doesn't bake with normal maps in mind. And some versions of the engine you can fix that, some versions you can't. So why is that? What does that mean when you bake lighting? It means your materials look very flat until you do reflection captures. And what are reflection captures? Do I need them? Do I not need them? Can I use screen space reflections? Learn these systems as a lighting artist. This is where the technical part is important for every sort of subset of a lighting artist. How PBR, physically based rendering, and PBL, physically based lighting, affect lighting. So albedo brightness is a big one, a common one that we fix a lot, and we usually educate teams on. So your albedo should be a certain brightness. Every albedo has a specific range of brightness it should be based around. You can get these values online. I have a bunch of links about this on my Miro board for lighting for games, which will be in the comments below, so check that out. EV100, lighting values, color spaces. Color spaces, this is one I'm starting to dive into. Starting off right away, it's not a big deal to know about, but eventually, like after your first 2 years, you're going to want to start looking into HDR. What is Rec 2020? What is Rec 709? What's the difference between SDR and HDR? These are what will start to transition you into the senior and principal ranks of lighting. And EV100, physically based lighting, that is something you should probably start learning as a junior. You may not know it the very first job you get. It depends on where you're learning, which is why I come to the Patreon. We'll teach you that. Shill. But you will learn that usually in your junior phase, right? And the last one is being good to work with. This is for every role. No one likes somebody that's a hard ass, right? It makes people uncomfortable. It makes you look like a prima donna. There are ways for you to not be a yes person to everything said and to fight your corner, as whilst being sensible and polite in your role. Is just be professional, right? And that sounds like common sense, but there are lots of stories out there of somebody being just insufferable to work, and it just brings the whole morale down, right? So you don't have to be yes to everything, and you have to fight your corner a lot, but you can do that in a professional manner and not a toxic manner. So make sure that you're easy to work with as much as possible. Production skills, things you can start practicing now. How long will it take? So how long will it make this asset? How long will it take to light this area? How long will it take to do block out lighting for this area? The more you estimate, the better you'll get at giving producers time estimates, which they will put on your Jira and track on your Jira so that you can make logical evaluations about how long it takes to light an area, right? Organization, screenshots, get the same camera angles on your level, keep the same camera angles as much as you can, take before and afters, especially when you're showing art directors, because art directors are very busy. They're not going to remember necessarily what they told you a week ago because they've had hundreds of meetings. Show them what you had before, show them what you have now, and what the feedback they gave you was. There is an art to being able to simply and effectively communicate the work you've done in a visual manner. Before and afters are one of those methods among others. So remember, time is money. Be efficient and as simple as possible when you're talking to an art director. Art director isn't going to care the technical things you've done to make the lighting look good. They're going to care about the visuals and the feedback. Whereas a technical art director will probably care about the technical stuff. It's knowing when to say things to the right stakeholder. And that's going to be something you learn as you get into the industry as well. Update producers, track your feedback. Just be professional with that and do the admin side. Optimize. Don't optimize at the end. Optimize from the beginning. So place your lights in logical areas. Don't overlap them too much. Yeah, just be sensible with your lighting. And we have lighting optimization resources on the Miro as well. Proactiveness is a big one. This makes a big difference of going from a junior to a mid and a mid to a senior. If you have a problem, try to solve it first, and instead of just providing the problem. That it works in certain areas, right? If you have an art issue or a design issue, look to solve that with the people on your team. If you have a graphics issue, like something is just graphically fundamentally broken, yes, you can't fix that. You're not a graphics programmer. But if you have an issue with the optimization of your level, try and fix it first before just saying, oh, my level's broke, I need help. The more you can be relied on to complete tasks and work with other team members without the supervision of your lead, that is what leads you to being mid and senior, taking responsibility for your zone and the meetings. Salaries, I do link to salaries in the comments below. I have a few sections on, this is for the UK. I have worldwide too, but these stats, I have a median sort of stat page for the UK. So give this a read. I won't go too much into it. You can look at the values yourself. That'll be linked in the comments. And then we have a worldwide one as well, thanks to all the lighting artists that have provided their salaries for us to put on here. So these are worldwide ones. This is also in the same Excel. You can go and compare against and see what you need to see. Because again, getting paid what you're worth is important. Workflow guide. So this again is for new lighters. It's going to be very top level. Anything more advanced, I'd recommend researching into it, taking a course, taking a mentorship with, a lighting artist. So PBL, physically based lighting. What is that? PBL, again, this will be a simple explanation. It's something you can read into quite dramatically, and I recommend you do, especially if you want to be a lighting artist, because this is core skill. So PBL is a framework used to align game engine values and settings with real world values. You have the settings of real life based on photography of how things look and what the energy is of certain lights. Exposure values, you can copy those exactly into Unreal and get the same exact result if you had the same exact environment like a 3D scan, right? Values are based on the real world for exposure, light intensity, units, Kelvin, which is light temperature, nits, sky brightness, and more. And working with an PBL allows consistency across multiple team members and levels. So if you don't work in PBL, let's say we make a scene of let's say this scene on the right by Oya. This is physically accurate. We could make this look exactly the same with non-physical accurate values, like all the wrong values, because visually you can reach the same result from a visual point of perspective in Unreal with lighting, no matter the values you use. Now the problem is the physically accurate one is based off the real world. So if you Google the intensity of this light on Amazon and find the nits or the lumens value used. You can plug that into the engine and it will look like that. Whereas on the non-physical version, depending on your exposure, let's assume every setting is wrong, this light could have 50,000 lumens of brightness and look correct in the screenshot. But if you know how bright 50,000 lumens is, that is in no way correct. That's super bright. That's like a solar flare in a short room, right? So the reason we use PBL is it doesn't make a visual difference, but it aligns values across every level and across every lighting artist to what they would be used in the real world. So if you've been working in physically based lighting for years, you know how bright certain light should be. You go into Unreal, you plug that value in, 2,500 lumens, 2,000 nits, 500 nits for emissives, and everything reacts the way it does. You set the exposure value, 15 for day, maybe 11 or 12 for overcast, 6 or 7 for an interior, and things react the way they should. So it is an imperative system that you should learn, which is based off real world and photography, for you to get the most realistic base for your game to use across a open world, 15, 20 levels. The more you expand in the game, the more broken things will get if you don't use PBL. PBL basically aligns your values to real world values based off real world and photography. The more your game expands in the open world and the more levels you get, the more important PBL is. It's a growing technical depth issue with a lot of things like lighting. When you're lighting at the start of a project, maybe with a non-lighting artist, you'll get things that look good. But as you move on throughout the years, those incorrect settings are going to build up technical debt the more complex your game gets, because the values you're using to drive the visuals are wrong. So you can make, like this scene on the right here, you can make this look the same with and without physically based values. The difference is the physically based values are based off correct real world values in photography and light intensity, Kelvin. So the more levels you have, the more correct it is behind the scenes. You can find a light like this. I've got one of these in my kitchen. If I go put a light meter on that, I'll get a value, say like 500 nits or something. I can plug that value into the emissive. I can make the light coming off of it have the same intensity and it will look exactly the same. That is the benefit of physically based lighting, that your values work behind the hood that drive realistic visuals. Whereas if you have incorrect values driving visuals that look realistic, you're going to use like a 50,000 lumen lamp, which looks normal, but 50,000 lumens in the real world is like, it's like a solar flare in a dark room. So the more you align to a PBL framework, the more consistent it is to light across the entire game. You can use charts like this. Again, some of these charts differ in a little bit. So 130,000 lux for a sun is extremely warm. I don't think we'd ever see that in the UK. I think you'd have to be in like a desert, right, to get that type of scorching sun. You hear 120,000 used a lot as well, and that's quite bright. So these values, again, it depends on your studio's documentation, but these are rough values that are correct, right? Like a daytime scene could be 14 EV or 15. An interior could be 4, or it could be 6. It really depends on what you're doing. If you've got your own light meter, and again, we talk about light meters, equipment, HDR, PBL, again on our free YouTube video with Scott Warren, but also our second part a year later, 3-hour talk on the Patreon. We talk about all this stuff. It gets very technical, very advanced, but basically you can scientifically measure the lights in real life, plug those into Unreal, and it will react the same way. That's the beauty of PBL if you know what you're doing. So again, I have some resources for this on the Patreon as well, and there's a bunch of free resources as well. And yeah, a lot of the fundamentals at this bottom line here are based on photography, you know? So if you do a lot of photography, a lot of this will be very similar for you as you're going along. And I stress the term based. So if you chase perfection, you chase every single stat to be based off real world values, and you're not willing to change on that, you are going to limit yourself in creativity and art direction. You can still be artistic and creative whilst being based around physical and accurate values when it comes to lighting. You're always going to need to balance it with art direction. So you can have the correct exposure, but maybe you condense exposure. So you go from daytime at EV15, instead of going down to EV2 for night, you go down to EV4 to reduce the compression range. Maybe you have a light and it's meant to be 2000 lumens, but you make it 3000 lumens. You know, it's not the end of the world to do that. You know, you're still based around accuracy. You're just not, you're tweaking things to get a better visual result. So always start off accurate and PBL, and then stretch the rules a little bit after that, because you're still based around it. You're not completely using random values, all right? How do I light an environment? This is very, very top high level. It doesn't account for a lot of the things like different scenarios and whatnot. Have a look at the Miro. I have a Miro version sticky note guide with images of how I light. Also, I have some lighting videos on the Patreon of doing daytime and doing nighttime and all these different things. But from a very, very high level, if you're super new to lighting or wondering how to light, in a dynamic workflow, I start from complete black. I had global lighting, which is sky, clouds, directional light, and bringing up the general ambience. Then I introduce local lighting, fog, lamp fixtures, fake lights, lights that are floating in the air that give a little bit of a highlight. So you can see in here, the difference between global and local is I have much more subtle lighting from spotlights helping guide the way. So that's a very high level of how I light. I separate global from local. I have them on sub-levels. If you're not using world partition, you can use sub-levels. So I can turn them on and off using lighting scenarios. And that's basically how I light most things on any type of day, because that's how it works in the real world, right? We are governed by the sky and the atmosphere. And then we have local lights that can turn on and off within that. How do you optimize? Dynamic lighting is incredibly expensive, one of the most expensive parts of the game art pipeline, especially when you have shadows enabled. It's very easy to go over the top on this, so point lights and rect lights are incredibly expensive. We tend to use spotlights a lot of the time because spotlights only will render what's in the cone. So in the lighting complexity view, which is Alt-7, I believe, in Unreal, you can keep this mode pretty consistent by using spotlights and then being very careful of where you use shadow casting point lights and rect lights, keeping the attenuations very small because, again, they are very, very expensive. So spotlights are optimal. Stat GPU is a good start. You put this into the console and it'll give you your stats here. So you're looking for shadow depths starting off. That will give you the expense of your shadows and how expensive they are. So looking at the milliseconds behind that. In previous games I've worked on, we've aimed for 2 milliseconds for shadows. So depending on what your budget is, if you have 3 or 4 milliseconds for shadows everywhere, that would be too expensive in that case. But different games have different limitations on what should be what, right? But that's a good way for you to start looking at what is being rendered behind the scenes. Next is the light complexity. So that's Alt-7 as a hotkey. That will give you a view mode where the more pink and white and red, the more naughty it is. And the more red, blue, green, and maybe tiny bits of red, the more optimal it is. It also shows how many lights you're using. So obviously on the left here, this is cinematic lighting. This would not run in a game whatsoever. On the right, this would run nicely on a game. Obviously, there's more to optimization than that. But if you want to know how can I make sure as an artist visually I'm working in the correct way, hit Alt-7. Are you seeing any purples? Get rid of them. There's always a way you can massage the attenuations so that you're working in a best practice. Avoid having lots of purple and white. Try and use less lights overall to achieve your visual result. And that will usually equalize in a nice looking simple setup that is the most effective. Here's some examples of that again. So this is a scene familiar. Perfect light complexity, spotlights to help motivate the golden path where the player will walk, and then the blue is just being done by the skylight or directional light, the base lighting. Here's one from me. So again, global lighting is blue, and I have a big spotlight hitting the middle in a cinematic shot way, and that's all green. Here's another one of mine. Little bits of red, which is fine, but again, not hitting that white and purple spectrum. You also notice how this sort of adheres to art fundamentals, right? A lot of this stuff around the camera is dark, because I'm not lighting it because I want the viewer to look into the image. So you can almost tell from your light complexity where the art fundamentals knowledge is, because you're putting the lights in the way you want the player to follow, look at, or follow the golden path for. And some more semi-advanced ones if you're using nanite. There's nanite mask and DRR, dedicated reflection rays. You'll probably only do this for your personal projects. In the studio, this is usually handled by tech art. So nanite, again, anything translucent will be red. Any of your sort of opaque meshes should be green. And then for dedicated reflection rays, this is a view mode where lumen kicks in for reflections on pretty rough stuff, so pretty shiny stuff. This environment is all stone, so there should not be this amount of reflections that lumen is dedicating towards, because that's expensive. This view mode is expensive. So because all this is stone, I lowered the threshold. And you can do this by fixing your roughness maps or doing it in a CVAR. And now lumen doesn't kick in for any of the reflections. If I had any metal things, it would probably be a bit of red. But for concrete and stone, I don't want lumen doing that because I'm not going to see that much of a difference. It's going to cost quite a lot. Again, it depends on your studio setup. This is just how I've dealt with it and learned from other people in past studios on nanite workflows. How do you organize? Use sublevels. If you're using world partition, just use logical folders and data layers. For light props, try to always use a blueprint. It can be difficult in some studios depending on how things are set up, but in most modern workflows, don't have a light fixture and don't just put a light in the world that is like not linked to it and just floating above it. Like, please use a blueprint. Set up a lighting system for your blueprints. It will just save you so much hassle and rework in the future. I could do a whole other video on why blueprints are important for lighting. But yeah, simple is, if you have a lamp, make sure it's a blueprint with the light in. Don't float the light in there. And here's an example of sublevels. So I have one for global, one for local. You can see in the images left and right, global is just the world lighting, and local again enables the guided lights from spotlights and interior lights. Sublevels are great. You can have them for VFX, collision. A lot of environment artists will separate structure from props, so the walls, floors, and ceilings will be on one sub-level, and all the interior props will be on another. So you can just click a single button, like in this sub-level menu, and get an empty room. Click another level back on, get all your props in. It really helps for visual organization of you just turning on and off levels at any time. It's also very good for perforce. The more sub-levels, the more people can work across different levels and not conflict with each other on perforce as well. Light Mixer is life. The Eye of Sauron sees all. The Light Mixer grants you the ability to see every light in the level and lets you adjust all the settings at once. You can add your own filters on what light settings you want to view. I use this view for like seeing if anything has a super high attenuation, if I don't have light LODs on. And this is the only way currently that you can select multiple lights of different types and change the settings at once. So if you select a point light in the editor and a spotlight, you can't access the settings. If you do it in the Light Mixer, you can change the same settings. So you can see here on the far right of this top image, I have everything on movable. I have LOD distance of 1000. I can see where my shadows are enabled. I can see my ray tracing is enabled. It just gives you a beautiful holistic view of all the lights in a level or across the whole game, depending on if the level's merged or not. And last section, this will be very quick because it's portfolio guidance. So the same advice, I'm not going to reiterate what is probably reiterated thousands of times a year. So a lot of the same rules apply. Simple, quality over quantity, show breakdowns and reference. I don't have any hard rules except for one. When you're relighting stuff, a lot of people use the same free packs, which can't be avoided in a lot of cases. Just try to avoid the really popular ones, like this. Don't do it. Just, no. You thinking of doing it? No, don't do it. No, just don't do it. It's not worth it. Even if you do it well, it's just, no. Don't do the train car. Lighting plugins I recommend, Easy Fog, PBL Database by Arthur, and Screen Space Scattering Fog. You may say, why don't you recommend Ultra Dynamic Sky? Because it's got a lot of settings that you won't really understand what they're doing, and it has a high cost in terms of like optimizing it. So keep it simple. Light with HDRIs, maybe light with the sky atmosphere every now and again, but I like to light personally with HDRIs. It gives the most control with what we're doing. But yeah, keep the add-on simple starting out. I run a Lighting for Games hub. It has the Patreon members on, but it has a bunch of free resources that I think are really good for lighting artists. Some are from me, a lot of them are from other people. It also has the Patreon content, so you can see an example of what you could get if you sign up at £4.99 a month. That's the link down there. I'll link it in the comments below. This is what it looks like. It might look a little bit different now. We have a bunch of more new talks and a new layout. And what we've covered, so the 3 sections, Q&A, ask it in the YouTube comments. And again, this is all the stuff we are building on. We're building the community. Come join us. The links are on there. Any questions, ask below. Peace.